How's it going, Song of Ice and Fire fans? It's Grant from Yearcats Miniatures bringing you the next episode of our faction overview series, fresh, brand new, and revamped for season 6. And I'm joined today by a really special guest to go over House Martell, Obyiscus. Jordan, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back talking about Martells.
Awesome. So how was the invitational?
It was a lot of fun. It was great getting to meet a lot of people that I've spoken to online but never actually seen in person. So that was cool.
Mm,
Yeah, it was a great time. Got to commentate some games on the Friday for the team event with Gamma. So yeah, it's
awesome.
a great time all around.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. So we're going to get into House Martell today. Obviously, this is a faction you've been playing since release. So
Yeah,
um, cool. Okay. So obviously you obviously did our last series overview with Brett when Brett was on the channel. Obviously I can't be quite as handsome as Brett, but I'll do my best. Um, let's get stuck into House Martell then. So first and foremost, so I always ask my guests, can you describe for a brand new player what the faction identity is and the playstyle is predominantly for House Martell?
yeah. I when I describe House Martell, I describe it as mobile control, I guess, is using kind of buzzwordy answer.
Mm,
Going into a bit more, Martell's whole game plan is around positioning and moving themselves around to try and isolate and pick out specific targets while debuffing the enemy. And you can use that sometimes to make it so you can get those engagements that you want by essentially luring enemies into traps. But yeah, that's the main way I describe Martell to people. It's tricksy. Um, it can be a bit of a harder learning curve for newer players, but it's definitely rewarding. And for new players, it can help you really get into the, I guess, key mechanics of the game that then if you move to other factions, you'll have already had to develop if you played Martells first.
mm. So so for someone that's coming into the game brand new then, so obviously, this isn't a particularly easy faction to pilot from the outset. It's one that you sort of need a little bit of experience, I think, or jump straight in deep end and learn there. But um, so on the scale of things, how easy are they to pilot for brand new players?
I think you can get to like a decent piloting fairly quickly. It's not like you're going to need to be playing for years before you can play them. So I'd say moderate. Um, and some of it also can depend on how the other players in a new player's area are playing. If you're in a if the new player's playing in a meta that's hyper aggression,
Mm,
they'll have a harder time picking up Martells.
yeah.
But if the other people in the meta are also playing more objective focus, more maneuvering around and that type of gameplay, I think the new players can pick up Martells easier because Martells can have a hard time, especially for a new player, dealing with that heavy aggression.
Mm.
So that's why I'd say moderate.
Okay, cool. And before we get stuck right into it, obviously we are brand fresh new into season 6. But how do you think the season 6 stuff has left Martell's?
I think it's left them quite well. They didn't really get any debuffs. They got a few tweaks to their attachments, which is nice. Martell's already, I found, often took an attachment or so the
Mm,
extra points is kind of good. Um, but I think they're in a good place. It'll take time to see how it shakes out. If season 6 ends up being leaning more into some of that hyper aggression that Martells can struggle with, or you need to be really careful with as a Martell player, it might make it a more difficult season for them. But I think overall they're pretty well situated.
Lots of discussion as well going on around the 5-2-4-3 split now on the top. Do you how are you finding list building in season 6? Are you finding you're running more on field units, or are you still playing the same style? Are you managing to spend the extra 4 points?
So for Martells, I find I'm still not a big fan of going to 5-2 as Martells. What I am finding in season 6 is going to more 5-3 5-3 splits. So, dropping some points places to get that extra activation and going up to 8 activations.
Mm.
That I find is happening more in season 6 um, than Martell's going to a 5-2 split.
That's really interesting. You said that. So, a release of this video. 2 weeks ago, we interviewed Mikkel. Mikkel said the same thing about Greyjoys. Last week, we interviewed Belisarius about Renly Loyalty Baratheons, and they both said the same thing. They feel the activation actually may go higher, and the 8 may become the norm to run. So to get the most air attachment. So it's really interesting to hear that seems to be quite a common theme coming up at the minute.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me. I think in the last season we were starting to see some more 8 activations coming out. People I think had gotten used to playing around pass tokens, which I think is what really had kind of killed the 8 activations for at least a season. As pass tokens came out, people were like, okay, well, there's no point playing 8 to 7. I think over time people realized, well, yes, they balance the activations with better because of the pass tokens, but there's only 2 of those. A lot of games aren't decided super early. And, if you can wait out the pass tokens or play around them, then there is strength to the 8 activation. And now for a lot of factions, or for some factions in particular, the 3 that you named in particular all don't have, for example, cavalry attachments, which means they need a 5th body on the field to actually usually get their attachment points, unless you lean into 2-point attachments, which some of the factions don't really have good 2-point attachments, or additional, breaking attachment limit models, which a lot of factions don't necessarily have good access to.
Okay, cool. That's a nice little insight to start with. So let's get stuck into this faction overview. So we'll go over the cards and we'll cut back to you and ask your opinion and the uses for these units. So first and foremost, the 5-point unit out of the starter set, we always start with this unit. So we have the Martell Spearmen coming in at 5 points. They have a movement value of 5. They have a 7/7/4 on a 4+ to hit attack profile, which we see more than often on spear units, barring a few of them. A 5+ armor save and a 6+ morale. So not a great defensive profile. They do come with the order set for charge. So when this unit is successfully charged from the front or flank, if this unit is not engaged with another enemy, it performs 1 melee attack action on the attacker before they perform their melee attack. And they come with the order tactical reposition, start of an enemy turn, target 1 friendly unit in short range. They perform a 3-inch shift. So on paper, quite a nice little manoeuvrable unit that can sort of help units bounce around a little bit. But Martell Spearmen, Jordan, how we feeling about these guys?
I think they're solid. When it comes to that 5-3 split we're talking about, we start seeing Spearmen come out more. They're a very good little support unit, right? They aren't particularly durable, but they can help with that position we're talking about with the attack repo. That's their main use. Right now, that's what they do. They support. Now they get usually a free attachment thrown into them, like a spear captain or Arya Hota, just to add more support to the faction while sitting on objectives.
Yeah, that's actually quite a nice combo, isn't it? With a spear captain, just chuck out the weakened tokens all over the place. Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So once upon a time, these were our only 5-point unit for Martells. Since season 6, this has now changed. The second unit now that comes in at 5 points are the Dune Vipers. So Dune Vipers now reduced to 5 points and have lost disrupt. Was counter strike they had, right, wasn't it?
Yes.
So they are a movement 6 unit. They have a 7/6/4 4+ to hit spear and net attack profile. They have a 4+ armor save, which is a nice armor save. 6+ morale. They come with spear and net, so after completing this attack, the defender becomes weakened and gang up. All friendly units melee attacks gain +1 to hit and +1 attack die on enemies that are engaged with this unit and at least one other friendly unit. So in our local meta, we were seeing quite a few people run these at 6 points with the counter strike. Does the reduction to 5 points and the loss of that make these a more viable unit for you?
I think so. I had started running them in a Vargo list near the end of season 5 with the counter strike. I do miss the counter strike going away, but having this as a nice cheap 5-point unit that's durable is really nice for some of those, especially for some of those 5-3 splits that we're talking about. More variety in the 5 means that instead of doing what you used to do, which would usually be three sixes and 2 5s, one being a spear, one being like a Stormcrow mercenary to get an attachment. Now you can have the Dune Vipers in there, and once you start going wider and if you have a Dune Viper or two, and you have 4 other trays, you start having that gang up come in to play a lot more often,
Mm.
which really can help boost the effectiveness of those other cheap Martell units. We have a lot of guys that are 4s.
Mm.
Once, if you can actually start getting Dune Vipers in places, and you actually can get that gang up, which is more viable with the higher, more bodies on the field, then it really ramps those up. Things like Outriders or even the spears we just looked at, once they're hitting on 3s, they can really start doing damage. And also, a lot of our units, like like the Vipers, have that nice, good degradation, right? 764. The spears were 774. Once you start adding both the hitting on 3s and an extra die, now you start getting these cheap units really putting out a lot of dice that are hitting.
Yeah, but we don't like to swear on this channel, but obviously, Brotherhood Without Banners have got a gang up on their 4-point unit, which really ramps them up. Um, do you feel they compete for the same position as Martell Spearmen, or do you think they literally give you 2 separate roles for the 5-point slot?
I think they're 2 separate roles. The Vipers are more like you're more likely to try and get the Vipers stuck in,
Mm.
not to try and do damage off the bat, but more as just kind of like a roadblock. They can tank a lot better than the spears. The weakened is nice, although there is a lot of immune to weaken, it seems, this season. But for those things that can be weakened, the weakened is quite nice.
Yeah.
Um, so these guys are more getting in there. The speed is also nice, like four up armor, but also still keeping that 6 speed is really nice to have.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, cool. Okay, so from 5 points, we move up now to the 6-point unit. So we're going into the Sunspear Dervishes, one of the first units that have come out for Martells in the starter set. So with these guys, they're a 6-point unit. They have movement of 6 again, so another very quick unit. They have the Dervish Blade, so they hit on a 4+ with a 764 attack profile. They have a 4+ armor save again and a 6+ morale. They come with the order Swift Retreat. So after an enemy completes a melee attack on this unit performs 1 retreat action. And they also come with Dervish Blades. So with the Dervish Blades, they can get precision as standard, so any 6 automatically wound. When attacking enemies that have not activated this round, they also gain critical blow. And that also pairs together with Elusive Escape, which is this unit may reroll any retreat dice. Enemies that they disengage from may not pivot and become weakened, so obviously pairing really well with the Swift Retreat. Yeah, Dervishes. I've always thought on paper these guys look really, really good.
Yeah, I've always found them hard to make work. Really, the 4+ to hit is really what hurts them here. They're a unit that wants to be attacking, and they want to be attacking early because crit blow is what they really want more than the precision. But they often end up not. And the second they don't have reroll, the second they're weakened, that 4+ really can hurt them,
Mm.
and they just start not putting out damage. You can play some cool, tricksy plays with them with the swift retreat, the objectives. Um, I was hoping they'd get a little bit of love this season, but they're not bad. They have a hard time fitting in. There may be more space for them now in some of those 5-3 splits. In the Now that it's effectively there could be a third 6-point slot open. In the past, I'd usually take Vipers to try and be a force multiplier, but now since they can be one of the 5s, maybe the Dervishes can find their way in.
Mm.
There's also some an attachment in particular that I think could work quite well with them, giving them rerolls that we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll talk about later. That might be nice to try with them and might help deal with some of their issues.
Yeah, and do you feel they might be slightly powered up by the frequency of Dune Vipers increasing as well? Because obviously with the gang up, then making them hit on 3s.
Yeah, if we start seeing Dune Vipers in places, I think they definitely really like the gang up.
Mm.
That small change can really be the difference between them,
Awesome, awesome.
really hitting hard and not. They're definitely a hard, like, to really get the most out of Dervishes, you need to be kind of thinking about them even more so than like positioning more than other units, because you really need to be thinking about having them angled, beyond just the normal angling to avoid charges or, um, you know, charge block other people and things like that. You also need to be really thinking about the angle that they're at, so that when you retreat, where your enemy that charged them is going to be facing, because of that elusive escape.
Mm.
If you can really get the most out of the elusive escape to have infantry units charge them and then get forced to be staring off towards the side of the board when
Yeah.
they elusive escape away, then you can kind of get your opponents out of position.
Mm-hmm.
But to really do that, you need to. It's a lot of extra thinking involved. So
Yeah, definitely a thinking unit. Okay, cool. So for a unit that we think might look good, so I think the unit that we are confident look good, the Skyreach Bowmen. We obviously did the unboxing of these, and we were really impressed by them. Obviously, you've had quite a few months now of playing these guys, so I'll quickly go over the profile and we'll come back to them. So they're a 6-point unit. They're movement 6, so again a very quick unit. They have the Desert Marksman bow ability, so it's long range attack that he hits on 3s, 7/6/5 attack profile, and they have the melee attack daggers, so they hit on a 5+, 5/4/3. They have a very jippy armor save at a 6+, a 6+ morale. They have Desert Marksman, so when attacking enemies that have not activated this round, they may reroll attack dice and the defender becomes vulnerable. Obviously, very important that we realise that is only to do with the long range attack, not to do with the dagger attack, as clearly stated by the symbol. And they come with outflank, so you may hold this unit off the table in reserve instead of deploying it at the start of the round. If you are not the first player, you may place one unit from reserve fully within short range of any friendly or flank table edge unactivated. Now, I've seen loads of these. I think our chat really sort of fired the engines of Skyreach Bowmen and Bronn at my local community. Certainly in YCAT's events, people that are committed to the channel that watch our videos, because Bronn in Skyreach Bowmen was disgusting. Obviously, we can't do that anymore. But are these guys still as good?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was back and forth on. I did bring Braun and Bowman to Invitational in one of my lists. I had been back and forth between just putting a Spear Captain in them from before that.
Hmm.
Braun could put out more damage, but I was always of the thought, being able to keep the enemy weakened and try and stay alive a bit more might be better. They're definitely still very solid even without Braun. One thing, playing them more and getting them on the table more, they are very fragile. So to be able to have them not get hit is big. So we see things now that we might see those wider lists and have more spearmen in there. Spearmen synergize really well with these guys. They can shoot somebody, and then the spearmen can tack repo them outside of range of another long range unit. So if they're in a shooting fight with another ranged unit, if they can get the first shot, then the spearman can pull them back 3 inches outside of the shift and shoot range of the enemy. So those nice little combos can be quite good. I am playing around with some 5/3 lists that have two bowmen. In those, it's really a question of how well you can protect the bowmen, because as you pointed out with their defensive profile, if they get touched, they kind of can melt pretty quickly. The one saving grace with them is they do degrade very well. So even though they'll likely be losing ranks, their shots are still staying fairly high. They aren't dropping. They only drop 1 per rank, which is pretty solid for a range unit.
Yeah. If only you had an attachment with boldness encouraging, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't normally put the boldness and courage attachment in these guys, mainly because I'd prefer they don't degrade in a harsh enough way that I really care about the extra dice at each rank, whereas some of those more support units I think can be more valuable. Just because these guys are going to be sitting back, and hopefully then they can help also be supporting the rest of the faction, which is kind of what the Martells like to do. They like it. Their units like supporting each other. One of their units in isolation usually won't do much. But when you take the other units supporting them into play, then that's how they work together. The Martells like playing together as friends rather than as a bunch of solo units.
Awesome. When we spoke about this before, we were talking about potentially running 2 units, but you said that you were still playing around whether or not it was going to be 2 bowmen or a bowman and a skirmishers. Is that still the same conflict you're having in your head, or?
Yeah, well, I think I still think if you're going for a 4-3 split, you only take one of these guys.
Yeah.
It's once you go to that 5-3 split that you can start considering it. Essentially dropping the skirmisher to take these two of these guys.
Yeah.
Once you go to the 5-3 split to get a skirmisher in, you I think you generally drop these guys because if you have a skirmisher in a 5-3 split, that leaves you only one 6 point a slot for only one 6 point unit. And I still think it's important to have what I expected. I think is the next unit, which is the Outriders. So
Hmm. Okay, cool. Okay, well, let's get stuck in. So we talked about the bowman. Let's get stuck into the sand skirmishers then. So, obviously, quite well, one of the older units for Martells. A 7 point unit now. It's moving at 7 points. Um, so we have a 6 inch move again. We have the skirmisher's bow. So it's a short range bow this time, is indicated by the single arrow. It's a 754 attack profile, hit on a 3+. They have the melee ability Skirmisher's Blades, which is a 4+ to hit, 754, a 4+ armor save again, a 6+ morale again, and we come with the Order Quickfire. So after this unit completes a maneuver or retreat action, this unit performs one ranged attack action. It also comes with Scout Opening, so again, another order. Start of a friendly turn, target one enemy in long range. Until the end of the turn, friendly units' attacks on that enemy may reroll any attack dice and gain precision. Now, we see lots of these on the table, Jordan. Do you want to explain why?
yeah, so they're the best unit in the Martell faction. They're one of the best units I think in the game entirely. They have just a ton of utility. They're fast. Their shots can do a lot of work. They can help buff the rest of your force by using things like scout openings. And the other big thing, they're very much, um, their power level is really turned on by a couple of attachments that you'll often see in them. And that's one of the reasons that I think we'll see a lot more double skirmishers this season. In the past, some people ran double skirmishers, but for me, the biggest issue with double skirmishers was skirmishers really like being an 8 point unit. They really like having either the High Hermitage Sentinel, which is my preferred attachment, or the Spearlord in them. Uh, Essentially doing two different things for them, either buffing up their utility and speed or their out damage output. But now that you get free attachment points, it's really easy to have two of them in your list with attachments in it because it's not it's that's 14 points now instead of 16, which is a lot more usable. These guys will really end up being, I think, a mainstay of most Martell lists. They're of the units that opponents get frustrated by, they're definitely one of the most because they're just really hard to pin down. You can, at Invitational in my first game, I had my skirmisher, cunning ploy, march up, my right flank, kill something, and then just essentially start retreating away. Ended up somehow back passing through the entire employment, side of the table, and then back into my deployment zone, somehow surviving the whole way. They're often compared to Ranger Hunters and Night's Watch, but the big difference is that 4+ save really makes a big difference. It, on its face, sometimes it doesn't feel like it will, but they survive a lot better than you'd expect, and can just be annoying and harassing your opponent the entire way.
Yeah, that 4+ armor save still catches me out to this day. I've been playing the game long enough now that and gone over these units long enough now that I should know they've got a 4+ armor save. But every single time I attack them and a guy goes, "Okay, yeah, I've got a 4+ armor save," like, what? It's crazy, but I mean, it's good. Makes me really good unit. Yeah, and they've not seen any changes since the 2021 update, so it must be doing something right.
Yeah, they have not been touched since release,
Yeah, it's really nice.
which is nice.
To be fair, there's a lot of that for the Martell faction. There's only been quite sort of little tweaks here and there. I think they've done quite well with the balance of Martells from the outset.
Yeah, I think they've been like they're I think they're very much happy with how Martells play, and I think I've said it before. Martells definitely feel like they play the way you'd expect them to play, more or less,
Hmm.
um, on the table, and I do think the developers have done a very good job with overall balancing the faction and also making them play how you'd want them to. It's mainly now it's honestly just the dervishes that I'd like a little bit of love, not because they necessarily need a ton of it, but uh, just to make it so it's more for internal balance than anything, so
Yeah,
that you reach for them more on par with the levels that you reach for the other units. But
yeah,
can't really complain. The Martell faction's in a good place.
awesome, awesome. So from these guys, we move on to the Sunspear Royal Guard. Sunspear Royal Guard I've always really, really loved the look of on paper and as miniatures. One of the early units to come out from Martell. They're a 7-point unit. They have a 5-inch movement. They have the Royal Spear Attack, which is a 3+ to hit, 774. So really good degradation now on the attack profile. They hit. So they've got 4+ armor save, a 5+ morale. So really good morale. And they come with the Order Martial Training, which is an order. When this unit is performing a melee attack before rolling attack dice, this unit may re-roll any attack dice and the defender becomes vulnerable. And they come with Shield Wall. So this is another order. When an enemy performs a melee attack on this unit after rolling defense dice, if this unit is being attacked from the front or flank, it blocks +1 hit for each of its remaining ranks. Sunspear Royal Guard have always seemed a really nice balance between offense and defense when it comes to units. And I see a lot of them. I see at least normally one in each list. Do you want to go over your sort of experience of using Sunspear Royal Guard?
Yeah, they're another staple. They're kind of the anvil for the list, right? They don't like getting shot at, but you don't want to really attack them in melee because between their own defensive abilities and Martell's having a lot of cards that debuff melee attacks, it's usually just not a good prospect. They'll often be dangled out there for something to entice your opponent to charge and get engaged with, and then they're happy to take a charge, and then hit back themselves. Thanks to that martial training, they're still getting their rerolls because of that degradation. Even if they do strip a rank, which with shield wall, if you're attacking them in melee, is very much not a guarantee. Um, they're usually hitting just as hard. So they're usually like an anvil. They're a common bunker for a lot of the different commanders. They're my go-to place for like Oberyn a lot of the time because his ability to attack with his Manticore Venom smacking back into a unit that had martial training can just really help push through those extra auto damages. But yeah, you'll see them a lot. They are a very good. They really nail that mix between defensive and offensive
Mm,
without being too weak in either. Sometimes when you have that jack of all trades type of unit, you end up having a unit that's not useful as a defensive unit, not that useful as an offensive unit. But Sunspear Royal Guard are really good at kind of doing both.
yeah, yeah, it's a very nice unit. Yeah, it is so often used as a commander bunker, which is really cool. Because that's where you want your commander in the Royal Guard, right?
Yeah,
So next up we have another retinue, but this time we've got Darkstar's retinue. So this guy is a 7-point unit. They have a 6-inch move. They have the scimitar attack ability, which is a 3+ to hit, 764, a 5+ armor save, and a 5+ morale. They have the order overrun. So when this unit surges forth, instead of surging forth, this unit may perform one charge or march action. And they have the fuel by slaughter, again a melee attack ability. After this unit completes a melee attack, if the defender suffered any wounds, this unit restores 1 wound plus 1 additional wound for each of the defender's destroyed ranks. And the scimitar comes with critical blow as standard. Um, these guys got really big swords in the sculpts, and they look like they hit hard with really big swords. Are we right in saying that?
yeah. So they can hit hard if they really want to fight into lightly armored troops. That's really where they shine. Once they start hitting heavy armor, they can definitely struggle a bit
Mm,
because they don't really have a way to crack it. And because they're a bit more fragile, they really need to be doing damage with that fueled by slaughter um, to survive. There are some changes this season, I think, that make them more viable. A common attachment that we'll be seeing a lot. Edric Dane really helps them because he can help give them their rerolls back, which they really like. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more aggressive Martell lists, particularly with commanders like Ario Hota, or Dorne commander with Ario Hota being the commander attachment. And these guys can really cause an incredible amount of damage, and against lightly armored troops like a lot of Greyjoy list or free folk, this unit can just kind of blow through enemies, especially if that enemy's been softened up by skirmishers or bowmen, picking off a rank or so. One of these charging in with rerolls and something like Ario Hota giving them extra hits and things like that can really just blow through a unit. The other place I think that they can be interesting is with Harmon Uller, who with battle endurance and set for charge can open up some really annoying things with these guys. The last thing you want is charging in a weakened unit and into one of these guys and have them attack first and kill you, and then overrun into one of your other units. It's a bit of you need a lot to work and happen there, but everyone that's played a cripple unit in the past knows that sometimes you just roll all the sixes and enemies explode. So
yeah, for sure. So just obviously the namesake of this unit is obviously Darkstar. If for people that are not into the game yet or are looking to get in the game, Darkstar being a commander and an attachment as well. Does he have any synergy with his own unit or?
he does have a bit of synergy with them. The problem with Darkstar Commander in particular, Darkstar Commander feels like he's almost perfectly designed to be in skirmishers. I don't think I've ever seen Darkstar run in anything but skirmishers. I've never run Darkstar in anything but skirmishers just because his kit is perfectly designed. He has cards that give only him and only him the ability to do extra maneuvers, which skirmishers like. He gives them boldness and courage, which skirmishers love because they degrade poorly. Um, you know, these guys aren't bad with him. Like, if skirmishers weren't an option, or if you just really didn't want to run him in skirmishers, I think these are a perfectly viable option for Darkstar Commander. He definitely can buff them in a similar way, gets their dice even higher, which critical blow, the more dice you have, the more chance you have for those sixes. He can give them vulnerables with martial training, which again can help them get through some of that armor. So it's not bad with them. It's just not who you see the most. His attachment version isn't bad in them. I could definitely see him run. I was actually I was surprised. I was expecting when they started previewing all of the, if you have this commander, you get this attachment for free, or, this unit can bring this attachment for free type of thing. I was surprised that there wasn't something like that with Darkstar. I was expecting that they'd make it so like his attachment could be free in a unit of Darkstar Retinue, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't. This is like the only retinue unit in the game that has no, you know, direct connection with the person whose retinue they are.
Yeah.
So I did find it a bit odd that they didn't do that. I don't think it would have been overpowered. I don't know if it actually would be taken because Martells don't necessarily have a lot of space to fit all of their attachments as is. So that was a bit odd to me.
Yeah, it would have been really good. Now you said that, it would have been nice to have done that because it sort of pushes it definitely seems to be a push into the fluff for this season 6 update. So it does seem strange. Maybe it's something they've missed off. I don't know. Maybe we'll see it in the future.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So that's it for our two-legged retinue. So we're now looking at the four-legged unit. So we're going to get into the Starfall Outriders first at 6 points. So these guys, obviously, I'll separate these from the other 6-point units just because the next two are going to be cavalry. So the Starfall Outriders, 6 points. So 6-inch movement. They come with a scimitar, 4+ to hit, and a 7/4 depreciation, a 5+ armor save, and a 6+ morale. They have the cavalry rule. Now the next unit has this as well. I'm not going to read it twice, so listen to this once. They come with 3 wounds per model. At the start of this unit's activation, it may perform 1 maneuver action. So you still get 12 wounds, and you get a free maneuver action at the start of the activation. The scimitar comes with critical blow, same as Darkstar's Retinue, and they come with Rally Cry as a melee ability. So each time this unit is performing a melee attack, before rolling attack dice, target one other friendly unit in long range. It restores 2 wounds. Rally Cry is a really nice ability. Yeah, I mean, Starfall Outriders, they seem like quite a nice unit for 6 points. Are you running these guys? Or girls, I should say?
Yeah. They make it into most by far most of my lists. they provide a really great support function. That rally cry is one of the few ways Martells have healing outside of taking the bags. So they can often jump in. They're really good at just sometimes just getting in the way. You don't want an enemy charging into one of your other units. Sometimes these guys can just kind of jump in. They can often die, but they can do some damage on the way out. As we were talking about with crit blow, sometimes they just spike their crit blow. It
Mm.
happens more often than I think you'd expect. It also can make them fairly consistent. Like 4+ to hit isn't great, but especially when you have rerolls and things like scout openings from the skirmishers can give them rerolls back. Um, you can often get most, if you're rolling 7 dice, a lot of times, I'll find, especially with rerolls, I'll get 7-ish hits because, I'll miss a couple, but the crit blow can make up for the misses. So
Mm.
they're solid. They're a fast unit. Um, the 6-speed cavalry is nice. They're fairly cheap. They help with some of that maneuverability. So yeah, no, they make most of the lists. They are relatively fragile, but um, you know, they're 6 points and they're cavalry, so you can't really expect for much.
Yeah.
If you do have an extra point, the new Fortune Seeker is actually really interesting in them. You can't use your free attachment points from what we can tell to pay for it, but if you happen to have an extra point, the Fortune Seeker being able to give them a bit of self healing and also potentially having rerolls, giving them their own native rerolls is a really good way to kind of boost them up if you have that extra point lying around.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Well, I suppose that'll do until we get a mounted Oberyn commander, right?
Exactly, until we or an attachment box.
Yeah.
Yeah, Martells sadly are one of the only factions that do not have a native cavalry attachment. The others being Greyjoys, who don't even have native cavalry,
Yeah.
and then Boltons and Brotherhood without banners, and then I guess Renly side Baratheons technically, which really does impact list building and being able to get all those attachment points out, which I am disappointed by, and I really hope that we see a Martell attachment box soon because of that.
Yeah.
So
Nice. Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. Cool. Okay. So a nice cover unit. That's all about positioning, which is what we like. Um. So the next unit of knights we've got Starfall Knights at 8 points. They have a 6+ movement. They have the Starfall Lance attack ability, which is 5/4 depreciation on hitting on a 3+. They have a 4+ armor save and a 5+ morale. They have the cavalry rule, as explained before. They have the Starfall Lance, which comes with Sundering natively, so you always get Sundering. But when charging, they roll +2 attack dice for each remaining rank in this unit. If attacking an enemy in a flank or rear, before rolling attack dice, that enemy becomes panicked and weakened. Now remember, this is every time you attack. It's not just when you charge. Um, so I've got some opinions on them, but do you want to give us your hot takes first?
yeah, I'm still not a big fan of these guys. The type of aggression doesn't really fit how a lot of time Martells want to play. In the past, 8 points was a lot harder to justify because for at 8 points you also were looking at skirmishers because you'd always put an attachment in them or mostly. So getting that extra point, that the 8 points was a bit of a squeeze. I think they can fit into list point wise more now.
Hmm.
Uh, I am very disappointed. They famously essentially always had slightly better ambush on their lance, right?
Yeah,
It used to always be it's ambush, but they get it on all attacks, not just the charge. Granted, with these guys, you pretty much are always charging. Martells have different ways to make you retreat. These guys don't want to be stuck in an engagement because they melt a lot faster than the other lance cavalry in the game, only having a 4-up save. The other 8-point lance cav. Um, but now Ambush got a nice buff this season to go up to panic. You give the rainbow panic, weakened, and vulnerable. Unfortunately, because these guys don't have actual ambush, they have their own special like built into their lance ambush. They didn't get the change and get that vulnerable.
yeah,
If they had got that vulnerable, I think these guys would have definitely started seeing the table more. Having that vulnerable is a big deal for
mm,
them. The difference between a lance charge in the flank against a vulnerable enemy versus a not vulnerable enemy can be quite a big deal.
Yeah.
So I do want to see them. I do want to try and get them out more. I do want to start trying to play them out more. We do have now ways, like Ario Hota, to just chuck out vulnerables. So maybe it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, they're a glass cannon that you need to be very careful with. And I don't know how cannony they actually are, if that justifies the full 8 points usually.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my problem. Is I think that the ambush. I would love to have seen these guys lose this ability and just gain ambush. I think from a admin standpoint, it's got to be easy for Simon to just have one rule they can change across all the cards if they need to, rather than have one like this where it's sort of. I get that you get it every round, but yeah, I think they would have much more benefited from having ambush. And when I was speaking to Belisarius, we were talking about the Riders of Highguard, and I'd love to see more units like that. So the +1 to hit on the charge and the +2 attack dice for each rank on the charge to make them more of a heavy hitting unit. I just, yeah, I still don't. They're great miniatures. I love to see them on the table. But I just think at 8 points, that's a lot of point expenditure to get what is essentially just a slightly better Rider of Highgarden.
Yeah, the Rider of Highgarden change making them so good. Being 2 points less, and they're slightly less defensible, but realistically on a charge they hit pretty much as hard. These guys you really need to you're always needing to get a flank charge. Like you never can charge in the front with them. To get value out of them, you need to not. The games where I have gotten the most use out of them, they've actually only attacked maybe once or twice, and their value has been in just constantly move marching past enemies to get into the flanks or rears, and then the enemy feeling forced to, instead of doing something productive, just turning to face them, and essentially just running around in circles, not actually doing anything, which there is value in that, but it's always a question of, is that 8 points of value?
Mm,
um, so I definitely want to try them out. The other issue is, as we were talking about with the attachment points in this season, because you want to get your attachment points out, because if you don't use those 4 attachment points, you're playing down points on the field. So when it comes to tie breaks, you can lose off points of field. Cat Invitational, my day one, the only game I lost on points on field, and I always hate losing on points on field. So the idea that if I bring these guys and Outriders, that caps me at most using 3 of those 4 free points, which means against most opponents I'll be playing a point down, which is kind of tricky. So
mm.
maybe these guys will get a nice buff, we'll get that attachment box, or we'll get that mounted Oberyn commander, and these guys we'll see them everywhere, which would be nice, but they're definitely worth trying.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell people watching this, oh no, ignore them, don't bother with them, but if you're new and you're getting into Martells and you're figuring out what boxes to buy, these are probably the last ones that you buy.
Yeah. I think as well, it's obviously we've been around the game long enough to know that it's Simon aren't the developers aren't shy in just making a unit great out of nowhere. So if you're looking to get into Martells, I'd certainly worth grabbing a box, painting them up, using them casually, and then in a couple of months' time, they might be the greatest unit ever. Reference Golden Company Swordsman. So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
cool. Okay, sweet. Well, that is it for our units now. So we're going to head into the attachments. So obviously a big onus on attachments in season 6. So we've got our first 2 on screen now. We have the Spearman Captain for 1 point with order threatened. So start of a friendly turn, target one enemy in line of sight and long range, they become weakened. And also the Dervish Captain on screen now for 2 points. The Dervish Captain comes with the order Sow Discord. So start of any turn, target one enemy in long range. They suffer a morale test with -1 to their roll for each of their destroyed ranks. On a failure, they lose all abilities until the end of the round. They also come with Disrupt, which means that enemies engaged with this unit suffer -1 to hit, and that is any enemy. So it's not just attacking unit is in; it's any unit attacking anyone that's engaged with this as well. Yeah, 2 basic attachments. What are we thinking about these guys?
Yeah, so Spear Captain, I think we'll see a lot of. because weakening guys, even though there's a lot of weaken immune this season, a lot of guys aren't weaken immune, and keeping your opponent weakened is a big thing for Martells. They like it that their opponent are never really hitting at full force. So you'll see them a lot. Most lists, a lot of my lists at least, have them kind of splashed in, often in things like Bowmen. So they're great. Just being able to have a weaken on a stick is a great ability.
Mm.
The Dervish captain is very interesting. Is one of Martell's. Martell only has two 2-point attachments, so there are situations I think we'll definitely see. I think the Dervish captain is the better of the two, so we'll see it more. Disrupt is again always nice. If you're pairing that with keeping your opponent weakened as much as possible, opponents don't like hitting at -1. There's other ways of getting more negatives to hit in Martells. You can have enemies, especially in saying like an Oberyn list, you can have enemies trying to punch you. Normally a nice 3-up hitting units hitting on 5s or some theoretically even 6s, which definitely they aren't doing what they want to. So Discord's a really cool order. I'm always wary of things that require morale tests. So much of the popular things in the game these days have good morale, but people still fail 5-up morales. Once you start having ranks disappear, people be down ranks, it increases, and there's a lot of units in the game, especially now that we have attachments all over the place. The ability to possibly just say, actually, no, you don't have your abilities this round can actually be huge.
Yeah.
Um, just turning off these attachments and a unit's abilities can really be crippling to game plans. In terms of offense too, some
Mm.
of those defensive abilities just turn off. Martells hate it. If a Martell hit, Martells do not like their abilities being turned off. So an enemy Dervish captain could really make like Sand Skirmishers. Their morale is only 6. You
Mm.
don't you get a panic on them if they fail their so discord. Those Sand Skirmishers are gonna be really sad because without their quick fire, without their whichever attachment they have in them, like they're gonna have a hard time. So it's a cool unit. I definitely think we'll see it a lot more now.
Yeah.
Um, and there'll be games where it does nothing or not much, and there's be games where your opponent fails every so discord and they'll hate you for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It did have a really nice synergy with obviously the old Dune Vipers with Disrupt and Counter Strike.
Yes,
So it's a shame we've lost that.
it yeah, it's a bit disappointing that the moment that it becomes viable point wise, because that used to be an 8-point combo that you didn't get 8 points out of.
Mm.
Um, it definitely would have been a 6-point combo value this season, but I think that's the one thing I'm sad about in terms of the Vipers going down to 5 and
Mm.
losing Counter Strike is because Dervish Captain in them would have been fun, but I think it's still a net positive for the faction.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Cool. So next up on screen we have the Higher Hermitage Sentinel, which comes in for 1 point, and it comes with Ambush for the attack ability. So enemies this unit successfully charges in the flank or rear become panicked, vulnerable, and weakened. We alluded to this in the Starfall Knights, so this is what we wish the Starfall Knights would have had. And enhanced mobility. So this unit gains +1 movement and may pivot before marching, which is really nice. And the 1-point Spearlord comes with boldness and courage, which affects both ranged and melee. So each time this unit attacks, if it has full ranks, it gains +1 attack die. Otherwise, it is treated as having +1 rank for attack dice. So what do we think about these two then, Jordan?
Yeah, so this page is what I'd refer to as this is the skirmisher attachment page. You can definitely put these in other units. Spearlord, I actually probably wouldn't put in any of our other units just because our other units all degrade nicely. They either drop 1 dice or no dice going to second rank. And the High Hermitage Sentinel, I think there could be some cheeky lists where you have a bunch of these in units. Just have a super mobile list that can just say, this turn I'm just going to pivot and march my entire faction that mostly will be moving 7, so marching 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are both very strong units. I'll go through these. I guess them in order. So the High Hermitage Sentinel. Um, in the past, this was taken in skirmishers primarily for the enhanced mobility. The extra movement let them move in quick fire to have a threat range of 15, which was a big deal because you could get the first shot off on other ranged units.
Mm.
But the big the ability to pivot and march 14 inches was massive in terms of repositioning in the game, or stealing marches on people, thanks to things like Cunning Pulley being in the deck. The number of times I'd have, even turn 1, a skirmisher pivot so that they're, going to an angle your opponent doesn't expect, march 14, and then actually use their activation and then move another 7, shift and shoot something that your opponent did not think was in danger, potentially even then charging them the next round. Now that ambush is a bigger deal. Skirmishers love, if they can get a shot off into somebody, do a bunch of damage with their shot, and then the next round, if it's like a last activation, first activation type of thing, if skirmishers have shot something in the flank one round and then have the ability to charge start the next round, being able to charge and give the rainbow really makes it a lot more likely that the skirmishers could finish off that unit in melee, which means they can then do something like surge and shoot into another enemy. So this unit, this attachment was already great. The upgrade to ambush made them even better. I think there could be some cute things, possibly using something like a dervishes. I think maybe there could be some play having one of these in dervishes just to make them go that much faster, and then where possible, getting dervishes in a flank, which thanks to Swift Retreat and Elusive Escape, dervishes actually can often get into flanks because you charge them, they retreat away from you, you're stuck facing the same direction. Now when they've retreated out, they're in your flank. So I think this could be an interesting attachment to see played around if you're trying to make those dervishes work, because melee infantry getting into combat is always an issue for them. Moving 7 is a big deal.
Yeah.
It makes it so a lot of the times maybe your opponent's on a you could be on a 2-up charge, and your opponent a lot of the time will be on like a 4-up charge. So yeah, I think they're very good. Spearlord is just mainly very good with the skirmishers because skirmishers degrade poorly, as we saw. They're 7-5-4. The Spearlord makes them 8-7-5, which is much better. It really makes their damage just stay consistent and high throughout the game. In the past, I would generally run use the High Hermitage Sentinel in my skirmishers, but I've been looking at a lot of my lists where I'm looking at doing 2 skirmishers. I'll have one of each, one that has the higher mobility and some of the more tricksiness in that regard, and then one skirmisher that has more damage output from the boldness and courage.
Awesome, awesome, mate. It's really, really nice to hear some when we talk about this stuff, to hear that there's a lot of use for them. It's really nice to, because that's what we want main first and foremost, is the ability to play with our toys, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay, so that's it for the unnamed characters. We're going to get into the named characters now. So we have the second 2-point attachment that you alluded to, which is Oberyn Martell the Snake. He comes with Expert Duelist, a melee attack ability. Each time this unit performs a melee attack, before rolling an attack dice, choose one. This attack gains +1 wound, or target one infantry attachment in the defender's unit and roll a die. On a 5+, destroy that attachment. And with Viper Fangs, again, another melee attack ability. So when attacking enemies that have not activated this round, the defender becomes vulnerable and weakened. That's a really nice little ability there for Oberyn. And Harmon Ulla, Dornish Envoy for 1 point. Dornish Conviction, which applies to both ranged and melee. So this now reads, while you control crowns, this unit attacks using its highest attack die value. And Reinforcement. Each time this unit activates, it restores 1 wound. If you control the crowns, restore +1 wound. So a real big reliance on the crown there. So what do we think about these 2 attachments, man?
So I guess doing them in order. So both of them, I guess, both of them have the opportunity cost of not taking their commanders, which are both very strong commanders. I'm not a big fan of, for example, the Oberyn card. Expert Duelist is an okay ability. I still think they went too far when they made it a 5+ to kill attachments. I think if this was a 4+ to kill attachments, I think we'd see it more this edition, just because this season, because there's a lot more attachments. Usually it's a trap. Usually you just want to take the auto wound. And Viper's Fangs is a good ability, but it also a lot means you're trying to attack first in a round, which a lot of the time Martells aren't necessarily doing in melee. Martell play patterns are often, attack in shoot early, attack in melee later in the round if possible. The only unit that would be usually attacking early in the round is something like Royal Guard, and Royal Guard already put out the vulnerable themselves. So
Mm.
for 2 points, I don't really think he's worth it. Unfortunate. If I can have Oberyn on the table all the time, I would,
Yeah.
because I love Oberyn,
Yeah.
and his attachment and his NCU are still a bit, I think, lagging behind.
Mm.
Harman Uller is an interesting attachment. Getting some healing in there is nice. Um, Max attack dice is nice. I think the place I've seen him used is in skirmishers. Keeping that highest attack dice if you have crown, giving them some extra healing when they activate. Like that's useful. I don't think he's a terrible option for them. I think it's just the Spearlord and the Sentinel are better options and more consistent options.
Mm.
So if you really like Harmoneller, if you're a big fan of Harmoneller from the books, if you're you really take those deep cuts in the books, um, you can don't feel bad using him. I'd put him in skirmishers. I think is his best place. But personally, I'd reach for the Spearlord or Sentinel first.
Yeah. Nice. As you say, his commander's such a great version. So if you want to run him, it might be the place you land. Sweet. Next up, we have Aero Hota, Dutiful Juggernaut. So it comes with all the battle plans. So start of any turn, discard two tactic cards to search your tactics decks for any one card and add it to your hand. Shuffle your tactics deck. It comes with order, mark target. So start friendly turn, target one enemy in line of sight and long range. They become vulnerable. They have now put a change on him, so he now has to be taken. We can only be taken in an army containing Oberyn Martell, Prince of Dorne. Um, and the other attachment needs a Barasan for 1 point, who comes with three abilities 1 point, which is really nice. It's always nice to get a few different abilities for a single point. Furious Charge, so enemies successfully charged unit become vulnerable. Sundering, so the unit's melee attacks just gain Sundering. And Uncontrolled Rage, so each time this unit activates, if it can charge an enemy, it performs one morale test. On a failure, it performs one charge action on the nearest valid enemy and counts as rolling a 6 for all charge distance dice. So I think the problem I've always had with battle plan in Martells is that all of the cards are really good, and I've really struggled to know which ones to get rid of. But yeah, go on. Do you want to go over these attachments? What do you think of them?
Yeah, so Arya Hota, one other change that he got this edition this season, he went from 2 points to 1 point.
Yeah,
I used to not like him at 2 points. Similar to what you're saying, Martells have a really good deck. It wasn't worth it to me to pay 2 points and then also be discarding good cards. For 1 point, I think he's definitely going to make a lot more lists. While the Martell deck is very good, there's definitely times that having a specific card is more important than having two other good cards.
mm,
And there are some weaker cards in the deck that you're more likely to be, happy discarding. Not that they're bad, but if it's a matter of um, start of any turn, I know my opponent's about to activate this unit and charge me. If I have rising temperatures right now, before I can pull rising temperatures by getting rid of a couple okay cards in my hand or good cards in my hand, but that means that I know they're about to activate. There's the Lance Cab that's about to charge into me. If I can throw Rising Temps on it to make it so they're -1 to hit and can't play their, auto hit all their dice card, it's definitely worth it. That timing is a big deal, I think, and making it because it's start of any turn. And,
yeah,
if you know what your opponent's about to do, you could play it is a big thing. So I think he's going to see a lot more. Dorne Martell, the one you have to bring is the non-commander attachment NCU, and he's already a quite strong NCU.
yeah,
So if they're going to put a limit on him, I think that's not that big of a limit. The only issue with Dorne Martell NCU right now is into some factions like Brotherhood Without Banners. He can be a bit of a liability just because the Water Gardens can be a bit of a liability.
yeah,
Um, Now that they've started adding more of those, instead of do you control this zone, it's does your opponent not control that zone? With more of that in the game, Water Gardens can end up backfiring on the Mardo player a bit, excuse me. So that's really the main consideration for whether you don't bring him, essentially, because you don't bring Doran.
mm,
Obara Sand, she gained Furious Charge this season. Uh, she's cool. Like she can definitely boost the output of your units. Putting her in something like um, Retinue, Darkstar Retinue, can
Yeah.
really help deal with what we were talking about before about them having issue if they hit armor. Once you have, if you're putting vulnerable and sundering on a unit, suddenly that armor doesn't matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest issue with this attachment, and always has been, is uncontrolled rage. Uh, I don't like, even with a unit that has a 5-up morale, I don't like risking the fact that when they activate, I don't get to choose what they're doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I might be perfectly happy with them making their auto 12-inch charge if we're talking about something like Retinue. Um, but other times, maybe I don't want them to. Maybe I don't want them pulled into the enemy lines ahead of my forces or into a position where they're going to then get, countercharged by a bunch of units. So it's a risk. If you're happy with taking the risk, you can. I don't think it's terrible. It's just it makes me nervous at times. We do have ways to pass morale, like we have Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken if need be, if you happen to have it in hand. So it's not terrible. There's also a synergy you can do while putting Edric Dane also in the same unit as Obara, where
Mm.
he heals when you pass morale tests. So there's a bit of a cheeky when you activate, you're forced to do a morale test, which means if you pass it, you also heal.
Yeah.
Um, but uncontrolled rage has always been a tricky one for me. I always wish there was, you know, a benefit to it, not that it was just a negative. Really, like I think this ability would be a lot more interesting if you passed, there was a, maybe you got to re-roll your charge dice or something, right? Like give it something where if I'm being a bit more restrained, I can still get some sort of boost from it. But I understand that it's usually put in there to balance out otherwise strong abilities. So
Yeah. Okay. Nice. That brings us into Nymeria Sand and Elia Sand. So Nymeria Sand, both these guys are 1 point attachments. So Nymeria Sand, Sand Snake. She comes with the melee ability Advantage Strike. So when attacking enemies that have not activated this round, this unit's melee attacks may reroll any attack dice. And Dornish Vengeance. After this unit is attacked with a melee attack, if you control the swords, the attacker suffers 2 wounds, plus 1 wound for each of this unit's destroyed ranks. And we have Elia Sand, the Sand Snake. I think we spoke about these in the last update, but I'll go over it just for completion's sake. It's innate ability, boisterous charisma. So each time this unit passes a panic test, target one enemy unit in short range. They become vulnerable or weakened, and she comes with precision. So this unit's melee attacks gain precision. Um, Obviously, the boisterous charisma was always really nice because it was always the anti-Martell ability. But obviously,
yeah,
it's changed now. So how are these guys faring in the season 6 for you?
yeah. So going in order, Nymeria dropped a point this season, which is nice. Um, I think she's definitely more interesting. The the advantage strike, which the name of it is always still seems a bit odd. It should be like advantageous strike, but uh, it can be nice to getting some rerolls on units. I think the best home for her is probably in Sunspear Dervishes, where this allows them to um, make an attack. If they get into a unit near the end of a round, if the Martell player has started next round, then they can attack off swords and actually get their rerolls back, which is a big deal for them. They have precision and crit blow and hit on fours. You really want them to have rerolls. So if you can be attacking early with them and getting their rerolls back, thanks to this, I think that's a big deal. They also often will take a hit and then try and run away. Um, and they're not super flimsy, but they'll definitely take some damage. So if you can try and play around having swords as much as possible, uh, you know, like doing some auto wounds to the enemy is never a bad thing. Let's say they attack your dervishes and do a rank to them. Now and you control swords. That's 3 auto wounds on an enemy. The dervishes then run away and can probably charge into a flank or something.
Mm.
Hopefully finish the unit. So I don't think she's bad. I think she's definitely some play this season, a lot more than in the past. She definitely, when you had to pay attachment points, 2 points for her was a really hard squeeze. So I think we could see some more of her again. If you're bringing her, you probably don't want to bring Doran NCU because anytime you're building around, controlling X zone, you don't want to have the water gardens.
Yeah.
on the table to mess you up.
Yeah.
Aaliyah Sand, Boisterous Charisma is a great ability still. It doesn't have the same annoying targeting stuff as before, but just being able to pop out vulnerable or weakened tokens in short range is pretty big. She's probably best on one of your 5-up morale units, something like a Royal Guard. If you put her in Royal Guard, makes it so their attacks have, they have martial training to get the rerolls, and then having precision to help them cut through some things. There's a bunch of things in the game that precision's really nice into, giants, stuff like that, anything, resilience troops, things like that. So having precision in a unit is nice, and they have a high enough morale that, um, while they're being attacked and making panic tests, now they can start throwing out vulnerables and weakens. They don't like being shot at. Sometimes, you get shot at, and maybe the melee unit that's coming to threaten them or that's engaged with them. Now you can weaken that unit so that now the melee hitback's going to be that much weaker. Or if someone charges you and attacks you and you pass your morale test, maybe that crossbow unit your opponent has moved up into short range for rerolls can now be made weakened to again
Yeah.
weaken the output into them. So I think she's solid. She's a good choice. I think again, primarily, I think Royal Guard is probably her best place. You could try her in other places, but um, that would be my best. The other interesting place maybe for her is in something like Vipers. Their morale's not quite as good, but if they're going to be stuck in there trying to force their opponent into the difficult situation of, do I just run away from this unit to avoid getting ganged up on, or do I just accept it? Now they're starting to throw out even more weakened tokens, or setting up those vulnerable tokens for something like your Lance Cav, um, which, if we talked about the Lance Cav, if the Lance Cav, if they can go into a unit that has been, you know, charged into Dune Vipers for some reason, and that Dune Viper is thrown out a vulnerable on that unit, now that Lance Cav is really happy because they're, back to their 10 dice now, hitting on twos, things like that, because of gang up. So um, there are some of those combos you can kind of make work with her. It's always a question for some of these when we're talking about combos of uh, consistency, whether it's consistent enough for you that you want to run it in more than just a one-off type of game. So
Yeah.
it's one of the things you need to think about when list building. Of, am I just building a cool list to bring to my local pickup games, or maybe like a couple round tournament, or am I making lists that I need to perform consistently enough to get through a 7-round tournament?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really, really cool problem to have, isn't it? When you come to list building, so which ones you're going to use and include. And I've said it before that for me, list building is a game in its own right, and I love just working the combos out and trying to get the best out of those units. Obviously, the free
Mhm.
attachment points now just make it or they've just exploded open to really change things up. Um, Also, Dornish Vengeance, obviously, is that would you say it's quite handy to have against things like giants because doing it all by wounds rather than it's all surpassing the
Yeah,
resilience stuff.
yeah. Into something like a giant, that definitely is. They definitely would not like that. Giants, even like giants, dragons, solos, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of solos can't attack you essentially. If they're going to do a rank, they can't attack you.
Mm,
Um, Even if they don't do damage, even if they don't do a rank, 2 wounds is still bad. Or even again, you don't even need to. They don't need to do the damage if you're already just down a rank or two. Um, it can do bad. You do need to survive the attack,
yeah.
but as long as you survive the attack, it's, yeah, those low wound units can just be afraid while you have swords.
Yeah. And you think consider something like the Mountain of Rides. He's only got 4 wounds, right? So if he strips you of 2 ranks and you're hitting him back, you're getting taken off 4 wounds, it drops him. So yeah, it's quite nice
Yeah,
to try and put someone off, isn't it?
yeah, no, yeah. The solos and the giants and things like that definitely need to be a bit more wary of these
Mm,
of her. So again, it's sometimes hard to say. Like, we're early into the season. If some of those things start becoming more prevalent, um, or if they're prevalent in your meta, then this can be maybe a counter pick that you start seeing more.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, cool. Next up, we have two 1-point attachments. So Aris Oakheart with protection of the crown. So whilst you control the crown, each time this unit is attacked, it may re-roll any defense dice, and opponents cannot expend vulnerable tokens on this unit. Obviously, the not being able to spend vulnerable tokens is new for the season 6. Edric Dane, Lord of Starfall, becomes True Conviction. So it applies to both ranged and melee. If this unit is a Martell unit, each time it attacks an enemy with the same or more remaining ranks, it may reroll any attack dice. Again, it's a new ability for Season 6, so, well, it's not a new ability, but it's a new adjustment for Season 6, so now includes the same, whereas before it was only more remaining ranks. And he comes a Dauntless, so each time this unit passes a morale test, it restores 1 wound, and also Edric Dane ignores the usual attachment limits, which is going to be big in Season 6, because if you're struggling to get the points spent for attachments, you've got the opportunity to double up attachments in one unit. But I think this is a good enough attachment to take him anyway. But yeah, do you want to go for these two attachments for me? I know you mentioned before that Edric was a big buy for you.
Yeah, I'll do them in order. Eris is definitely interesting. The no vulnerable tokens is pretty cool. And there's some lists I've seen jumping around where people have been leaning into some of these control the crown abilities as Martells. So um, I think it could be interesting. Obviously, the obvious thing is making that Royal Guard anvil that much harder to kill. Um, they can kind of die once you start getting vulnerables with their 4+ save. But if it's the reverse, you're getting rerolls. They aren't. They can definitely tank. So he's definitely interesting if you're looking to kind of make like a Royal Guard or something like that a bit more tanky.
Yeah.
Uh, there might be a play of doing it in something like Dervishes, where you want the Dervishes to just be able to just survive or tank a hit and then run away at full strength. That can be kind of cute in missions like Dance with Dragons, where they can run up, touch a dragon egg, and then if they don't lose a rank when your opponent charges them, and if they do pass their morale, then they get to retreat for free and re-roll that distance, which is the fastest way to get away with a dragon egg. So
Yeah.
could be interesting there. Edric Dane will be in I'd say the vast majority of Martell lists, because he lets you put a second attachment in a unit, either into your commander's unit or another unit, which helps you get those points on field like we were talking about before. On top of that, he is good. He gives some healing. Our morale is not terrible. It ranges, it's 5 or 6, so it's not bad. So you can usually get the heal. And then True Conviction, the change to making it equal or more is actually really big. And that this applies to melee and ranged. Edric will probably start showing up a lot inside of Sand Skirmishers along with one of those other attachments.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to let your Sand Skirmishers be able to, maneuver, do their quick fire shot and get their rerolls, and then later in the round be able to shoot again using their scout openings to get rerolls, or um, use the scout openings to boost another friendly unit's attacks, things like that, is a big deal. There's definitely some interesting lists with him and Darkstar Commander, with I probably one of the next, if not the next attachment we look at, be able to come out in skirmishers behind you and start just shooting you twice with rerolls, or at least once with rerolls before you even get to activate, or before you can even really respond to him too much, which is also really cool. So yeah, Edric will see a lot. There's a lot more child soldiers on the field this season.
You So where do you feel that makes him a pretty much auto included? Is it the fact that he ignores his attachment limits, or is it just his rules in general?
It's the attachment limits.
Yeah.
His rules are in general are good.
Mm.
I don't think we'd see him very much necessarily if he didn't avoid attachment limits, right? Like, he's cool in skirmishers, but if he didn't avoid attachment limits, I'd still reach for the others before him. He'll
Yeah.
be in like every list because Martells are going to have a hard time fitting space, right? You
Yeah.
have in let's say a traditional 4-3 split, you have your commander's unit, so
Yeah.
you can't put an attachment there. You probably want a cavalry unit, so you can't put an attachment there, which means you have 2 units to put 4 points worth of attachments in. One
Mm.
of our 2-point attachments is okay, is okay, it's good. One of them isn't very good. So at best, that's 3 points there,
Yeah.
which means you're paying a point down. So the big thing for him is you're always you're pretty much always going to have that extra point, so there's going to be no reason not to include him.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Nice. Some good insight there. Last page of attachments, we have Gerald Dane, Knight of High Hermitage for 1 point, or in fact, all these guys are 1 point each. I won't repeat that. So he comes with insight. So when this unit is performing a melee attack before rolling attack dice, this attack gains vicious and rolls its highest attack die value. This is an order, so it can be used once per round. And he comes with furious charge. So enemies successfully charged by this unit become vulnerable. We have Damon Sand, Bastard of God's Grace. He comes with unsuspecting charge as an order. So when a friendly unit in long range activates, that unit may not be the target of enemy orders or tactic cards this turn. It must perform a charge as its action this turn. And Quentin Martell, Prince of Dawn, who just comes with outflank. We've seen this on the Skyreach Bowmen.
Yeah.
So it's just again, I'll repeat it just for people. So you may hold this unit off the table in reserve instead of deploying it at the start of any round. If you are not the first player, you may place one unit from reserve fully within short range of friendly or flank table edge unactivated. And this is another attachment that ignores attachment limits. That was a lot of reading. Do you want to give us your rundown on these guys?
Yeah, for sure. The doing them in order. So Gerald Dane, this is we kind of alluded to it before. This is Darkstar's attachment form.
Yeah.
Um, he's okay. Um, Cheers Charge is a nice ability. Insight's an okay ability. He boosts the offense of a unit. If you're going to put him in a unit, it's probably Dervishes or Darkstar Retinue. I don't know if he makes lists. I don't really reach for him. Um, but he's not so bad that if you really wanted to bring him, that you could. It wouldn't be the end of it wouldn't be like super like I'm making a negative choice that's gonna backfire. So if you like him, bring him. But I don't really rate him. His abilities are good, but they don't really buff a unit as much as some of the other attachments.
Mm.
Damon Sand is very much a very good support ability. He makes his way into, I'd say, most Ario, Hota, Dorne commander lists, especially if they're leaning into something like a Hota in retinue trying to do a big, massive charge. His ability allows a unit to essentially charge and negate a lot of the enemy defensive tech in the game and retribution tech. So um, it means Arya Hosota's unit can charge something like Stag Knights with their resilience. Resilience actually targets the defender, but it actually also targets the attacker based on how it's worded. So if you've used unsuspecting charge, resilience doesn't turn on. Shield wall doesn't turn on. If you charge into Baratheons and blow up their unit, which an Arya Hota charge can, uh, unsuspecting charge protects you from Final Strike. So this unit helps really buff, or if you're charging Martells, Martells can play 7 different cards pretty much on you as you charge into them to debuff your attack. Essentially, what Damon Sand does is say, no, This unit's going to charge. This unit is going to charge, and it will get. It will charge at full force. You aren't going to debuff it. It's going to get it, and it's not going to take punishment at the end. You're not going to charge it to a Lannister and get Lannister supremacy at the end. Um, so it's very strong if you're playing a unit that is going to be doing one of those big charges.
Hmm.
Which I think is good. Like I say he makes most of my Dorne commander lists because of that reason.
Oh wow.
And he just helps provide that protection, which is nice.
Nice.
Quinton Martell. Outflank is interesting. There's the classic outflank list with Darkstar Commander, where you're outflanking Darkstar and some skirmishers behind enemy lines. Now the humor of it is you're probably outflanking Darkstar with Quinton and Edric. So you have, most of your front row is taken up by attachments um, to come in behind the enemy, and then Edric, Lone Knight to maneuver and shoot, then activate the unit and shoot, or attack, use the tactics board to shoot or something like that.
Yeah.
So he's interesting for that. Generally, outflank I don't, for Martell's, I don't really like it too much. But he will actually end up making a lot of Martell lists this season. just because they want to fill up that point. There's a lot of times you'll be building the Martellus like we were talking about, where you have your 4 infantry units. One has your commander, one's cavalry. You put Edric in one of the lists. Now you have 2 more spots for attachments. A lot of the time you still might reach for 2 1-point attachments, which means you still have a point to spare. You don't want to play down a point. You'll just put Quinton somewhere, even if you don't use the outflank, just so you have it, which is a bit unfortunate. Like I don't like the idea of taking attachment just for the sake of taking an attachment, but I think you're going to see it happening,
Yeah.
and I understand why you'll see it happening.
Nice. He's become a victor of circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can do cheeky things with him. Like you could put him in an Ario Hota thing too if you want. If you're fine not and maybe every so often you choose to just outflank him. You outflank Ario's unit if you know that you're going to be giving your opponent first turn, and you just say, do you know what? It's fine. I'm just going to start up the board a bit. I was going to be up the flank anyways.
Yeah.
I think you can do it. I wouldn't plan around it. I think it'll be a thing that because people have Quinton in lists, maybe they'll start trying it. Um, you could do some interesting things outflanking Obara commander maybe, where you can come because she has reckless heroism for the auto charge. Maybe you can come into a cheeky flank position and get that auto charge early on in the game. But yeah, overall, he's not that good. If you want outflank, you can get it, but his main thing is we want to spend all of our free points, so he'll end up making some lists just sitting there. Uh, I know people have already joked about as a just as a meme and just to really push home that they didn't want to use it, just putting him in a unit of bowmen and just being like his outflank is buffing the outflank of my bows who already have it, just more as a joke than as actual thing.
Yeah.
There is some value in that too, right? You don't necessarily, if you're just putting him in so that you have the point on field, maybe you don't want all your points in one basket. So maybe you do spread it out to a unit that, keeps those points alive. Or if you're playing Here We Stand, you want your points more spread out so that, you know, you have, when you're moving points into zones, it's not, most of my points are in this one unit instead of having 10 points in one unit and 5 in the other. Maybe you have 9 and 6. So you can spread your points between quarters more easily.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Let's get into the commanders now. So we're going to go through these. Hopefully you're going to enjoy it today, and we're going to see you back for the tactics deck deep dives we're going to do. So although the commander cards are on screen, you're more welcome to reference them. We're not going to go deep into the tactic cards. We're going to save that for a completely separate episode. Otherwise, we'll be all day talking tactic cards. We're going to look over the commanders. I'll read over the cards, and I'll go to you to basically tell me what play style they are, and what they add to, or how they adjust the Martell faction and how they play. So, you good?
Yeah.
Cool. Oberyn Martell, Lord of Sunspear, so the man in charge. He comes with proxy orders, so he's also, first and foremost, we should obviously point out that he's our only NCU commander in the game. So as a proxy order, so each time Oberyn Martell claims a zone, you may replace that zone's effect with choose one. Arrow Hotar's unit may pivot, then perform one march action, or Arrow Hotar's unit may perform one retreat action. And the reason it directly assumes you're taking Arrow Hotar is because this version of Arrow Hotar must be taken as the on-field representation of Oberyn Martell. But this Arrow Hotar attachment is really nice. So Captain of the Guard comes with coordinated assault and melee attack, so when charging, deals one hit for each main rank in this unit. And as a melee ability, Furious Charge again, enemies successfully charged with this unit become vulnerable, and duty to the crown, so each time this unit passes a morale test, it restores 1 wound. If you control the crowns, restores +1 wound. Yeah, what we saying about Oberyn Martell?
Yeah, so Doran's an interesting commander. One, as you pointed out, he's the only NCU commander in the game. Which is interesting. It takes up one of your NCU slots. You do pay for him as an NCU. His NCU abilities are very much focused around Ario Hota and Ario Hota's unit. So usually Dorne is all about kind of pushing this one unit to do more. You see Hota in a couple places. One is Skirmishers, because Doran's can give you like a free retreat to shoot and things like that. My personal favorite is using him as just a big old, this is a missile, I'm going to shoot this missile at you. Aryo Hota, his card, the first two abilities are just, I'm going to do more damage to you. um, just, if you're getting that first charge, if you're in a fast unit with the ability to pivot and march thanks to Doran, you can easily steal that thing with cutting ploy. Get that first attack, you get 3 extra attacks from your ranks. Their enemy is vulnerable. My preferred place to put him is in Darkstar Retinue. Again, getting to that armor, which the vulnerable is a big deal for them. They have crit blow, so now you're 7 dice with crit blow, and then on top of that, an extra 3 hits. You can just melt units. He pairs very well with Edric Dane to get rerolls back. So if you need to charge over something like a corpse pile with the retinue, that first initial hit, you're going to have the same amount of ranks probably, so you're getting those rerolls back. The other synergy is nice is, Edric Dane has, was it Dauntless? Yeah, to heal off morale.
Yep.
Well, that pairs very nicely with Arya Hota's Dudida's Crown. So now you have this unit that hits really hard off the charge, possibly overrunning and hitting again, which is also really nice with the coordinated assault. But then you also have this unit with Fueled by Slaughter that every time it passes its 5-up morale test, it heals 1 wound from Dauntless and then 1 or 2 wounds from Duty to the Crown. So essentially you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, but it's kind of this kind of fun big missile you just shoot into the enemy, into like lightly armored troops. It can just it has potential and not completely unreasonable chance of just one-shotting units. And it's pretty fun. Yeah, Edric Dane was sometimes already paired with Arya Hota back when you had to pay for him. Now that he's free, I think it's a common combo. As I was just saying before, with Daemon attachment, you'll often see those 3 together: the Arya Hota commander with Edric Dane in his unit, and then Daemon Sand hanging out nearby to say, this missile I'm throwing at you, you cannot debuff it. It is hitting as hard as I said.
Yeah, yeah. So with Doran then, is he the only Martell zone replace NCU you have, or is there other ones that do the zone replace?
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, he is the only zone replace.
Okay. Cool. Um, nice. Okay. Well, yeah, he seems like a really fun commander, and obviously, he's a Hotar's a really nice model as well. So to get him playing is really good, and I think it's a really
Yeah,
nice attachment as well.
yeah. Between this commander, like this combo being better now, and his normal attachment seeing more play, I'm excited because I do love the Aryo Hota model.
Yeah. Does he find his ways into your 2 list, or are you still working out if that's going to be a thing yet?
I'm not sure. I still need to. The 2 list is hard to figure out, especially when you're still trying to figure out the meta,
Yeah.
or like where things are ending up. I think he definitely could be into some of the if there's more lightly armored troops coming out and things like that.
Hmm.
So we'll see.
Awesome. Awesome.
But he's definitely in the potential.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Next up, we have everybody's favorite man. We have Oberyn Martell, Prince of Dawn. So he comes with Manticore Venom, which is is a poison ability, which is a little green symbol with a poison vial on it. It's a melee ability, so once per game, after this unit completes a melee attack, attach the Manticore Venom poison card to the defender until they are destroyed. We'll get into what that is in a minute. He comes with precision on his melee attacks, and he comes with that Viper Fangs ability again, which is when attacking enemies that have not activated this round, the defender becomes vulnerable and weakened. So the Manticore Venom. So we attach this card to a unit. They cannot restore wounds. It's once per game as well, so you can't do it multiple times. So this unit cannot restore wounds. If this unit would become vulnerable, but is already vulnerable, it instead suffers 1 wound. Each time this unit activates, it becomes vulnerable. So we can see that there's quite a lot of Furious Charge in Martells, and there's a lot of way of getting vulnerable tokens out. But yeah, over Martell, everyone's favourite Viper. What do you what's your thoughts on him? What's his playstyle?
Yeah, so he is he's definitely pretty interesting. He's probably my I'd say favorite commander. Yeah, he's definitely my favorite commander. He's very good at debuffing the enemy We're not gonna get into his cards. A lot of his cards are really good for debuffing the enemy, which is nice. He has that Manticore Venom, which into some like the meta, big scary meta things, he's very reliable at killing something. The big one is that came up at Invitational a bunch was with Brotherhood Without Banners, Beric Dondarrion, and Kingsman, which just never die because of how much healing that faction has, because how hard Kingsmen are to kill. The joke is you just can't kill that unit. I faced that unit twice, and Oberyn killed that unit both times fairly easily, because to be able to turn off healing and then doing auto plink damage with just chucking out vulnerables, doing a wound, chucking out vulnerables, doing a wound, which he can do a lot in something like Royal Guard between his Viper's Fang, his Martial Training, starting with Ilaria. Maybe we'll talk about NCU wise to throw out a vulnerable. You can just do 3 auto wounds before you even actually swing your spears. So he's quite good. I do like him. The Venom is the big thing about him.
Yep.
But otherwise, his abilities are good at just kind of punching through and countering and making your opponent hit you less. So he's a popular one. He's also Oberyn. Everyone loves Oberyn.
Yep.
He's the Mandalorian. It's
Yeah. I mean, Oberyn is such an iconic character for Martell, so it's really great that he's usable, because a lot of times these really cool characters come out and you think, I really want to use him because I love him in the fluff, but he just in the current meta doesn't sit well. Um, yeah, I mean, for a long time, aggressive commanders weren't great commanders, but at least we're seeing these cool characters be revamped and tweaked and the meta changes so that we do see them more often, which is really nice.
Yeah, and Oberyn's not what I'd describe as an aggressive commander. He's actually more of a debuffing commander. He just has the ability to kill a unit very well.
Yeah.
Just specifically a unit. You choose one unit, that unit's going to die.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, he's actually more of a controlling and debuffing commander, which is he plays very well.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Next up, we have Abara San, so the eldest sister. So Abara comes with the order Reckless Heroism. When this unit performs a charge action before resolving that action, this unit suffers D3 wounds but counts as rolling a 6 on all charge distance dice. She comes with Fueled by Slaughter, which obviously helps with the taking wounds and Reckless Heroism. So after this unit completes a melee attack, if the defender suffered any wounds, this unit restores 1 wound, plus 1 additional wound for each of the defender's destroyed ranks. And she comes with base Sundering, so the unit that she's in just gains Sundering. So I guess this is the aggressive commander.
Yeah, this is the aggressive commander. She's kind of all gas, no brakes. Her attachment is just 3 very good abilities. Like in pretty much any faction, if you saw a commander with those abilities like that, that's a great cavalry, great commander attachment.
Hmm.
Um, it's unfortunate the Field by Slaughter doubles up with Darkstar Retinue. Otherwise, she'd have a great home in Darkstar Retinue, giving them the Sundering and the auto charge.
Yeah.
Um, she's not terrible, but it always feels bad doubling up on an ability like Field by Slaughter because it's expensive.
Hmm.
I've seen her run like you can play her in places like Dervishes or Royal Guard, um, just something you can throw into an enemy. I've seen a lot of people putting her early on. The big one was always putting her in like Bolton Cutthroats,
Hmm.
just a cheap unit. Just let them grind through and do damage and essentially kill as much as they can before they end up dying. But they could do a ton of damage with their vulnerable and rerolls. The more recently, you'll see her a bunch of the time in Lysine Sellswords, so the pirates. She can make it so their crit blow and their hits do a lot more damage. They can boost their dice because of pillage, things like that. But then they also get to heal based on the pillage they have. So after they attack, they get the healing for each pillage they have, and then on top of that, fueled by slaughter. So as long as you can keep attacking in that unit, you can kind of stay alive as long as you can. So if you want to play an aggressive commander in Martell, she's probably the way to go. She's not my favorite because of that. That's not my play style with Martells. But if you like that, you can. There's the kind of the joke that Aryo Hota attachment's good with her because she has probably the worst commander cards of the Martells. So you have extra bad cards in your deck that you can throw away to pull your good ones with Aryo Hota. So yeah, she's not the best, but if you want to, if you really you're stuck on Martells and you want to get that kind of I want a aggressive hit, She's a call you can make. Personally, I'd lean towards Dorne for a nuke unit, but um, she's perfectly fine.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, it always seems strange to me that she never had assault orders in the deck because obviously with the aggressive commanders we normally see them bring assault orders with them, but she's never had it. Um,
Yeah, I've always wanted her to get assault orders or Fury for the Fallen. I think lore wise might make more sense.
yeah,
Something that lets her get those extra charges or attacks, but unfortunately that hasn't come to be yet.
yeah, we can hope, we can hope. Cool. Okay. So next up we have Harmon Ulla. So when Harmon Ulla was first released, he was you'll correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but he was one of the most powerful Martell commanders there were. He was really good, really seen quite a lot. So he comes with Iron Resolve. So this unit gains +1 to panic test rolls and suffers -1 wound from failing panic tests. And he comes with reinforcement. So each time this unit activates, it restores 1 wound. If you control the crowns, restore +1 wound. Um, Although we're not going to talk directly about the cards, I think Battle Endurance, Set for Charge are very powerful cards for Martell. But yeah, Harmon, how is he nowadays?
Yeah, so when he was released, he was one of the three best commanders in the game. Not just like he was one of the top commanders in the game. Um, he's still quite solid. It used to be his attachment was also very good. His attachment is perfectly good now. Iron Resolve is a good ability. Reinforcements, gains of healing is nice. He's still a very powerful commander, primarily on the back of his three cards, which we aren't going to talk about too much. Uh, all three of his cards are actually amazing cards. They're all great cards, and really that's what you bring him for is those cards and the synergies you can do with those cards. Um, so I think there's without getting too much into the cards, that's what he is. There's
Mm,
some you can always do some interesting combos with some of those cards. Um, he has a card that buffs you, he has a card that heals you, and a card that lets you attack when your opponent charges you. All those things are good. You can do some interesting things with the not Sunspear Dervishes, but the Stormcrow Dervishes with him is one of my favorite units I'm playing around with. I always like that unit, and that unit just keeps getting buffed.
yeah,
But anytime you have set for charge as a card and can let a unit with Swift Strike attack with set for charge, you can just make your opponent very, very sad. There's nothing better than having your opponent set up a big cavalry charge, only for you to say, actually, I attack you first and then I run away. Now you don't get to actually attack me. um, so, yeah, Harmon's just a very solid commander. He's the only commander I'd say that really buffs your guys, and he also brings healing, which Martells don't have a lot of. So, yeah, he's a very solid kind of all around commander, with some interesting combos that you can kind of get into.
yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to going over tactic cards with you because especially the Martell tactic deck. Obviously, I'm looking forward to going over tactic decks with all of you guys that know this faction is way better than I ever will. But Martell deck just seems really good, so I can't wait to sort of get into some of the combos with you guys and yeah, and get into that.
Yeah, Martell deck is a lot of fun.
Cool. Okay. So next up we have the first of our newest commanders. So we have Gerald Dane Darkstar. He comes with the Order Martial training, which we've already seen on the Sunspear Royal Guard, so I won't go over that. And Boldness and Courage, which we've seen a few times now, so I won't go over that as well. But yeah, Gerald Dane as a commander, how is he looking?
So he's interesting. He's a very selfish commander. His tactics cards, two of them only apply to him, which is nice because you can use them to redraw cards, which is always good. Um, as I said before, he is perfectly at home. He loves being in Sand Skirmishers. We see that boldness and courage that we saw in the Spearlord, which I explained. The main place you'd bring it is in Sand Skirmishers. Well, now you have a commander that brings it for you, and then also martial training, which can really allow those Sand Skirmishers to now you can actually maybe charge in with them, try and wipe out a unit you've already shot, and then surge and shoot into a different one. So he works very well there. Some of his cards have ways to get him extra attacks, extra maneuvers, which is an extra attack for a skirmisher if they haven't used their quickfire yet, and things like that. So yeah, he's very cool. He's very much more of a tech piece commander. For a long time, you saw people running him with Quinton Martell to do some outflanking shenanigans. Now those lists essentially, like a lot of Martell lists that had attachments in them, you just have an extra point to upgrade another unit. So he's interesting. He's a lot of fun. Um, if you haven't tried the Darkstar in Skirmishers outflanking yet. It can be a lot of. Sometimes it goes poorly, but other times it just makes your opponent very sad. So he's a fun commander.
I really want to see him used a bit more because I feel like he's such a cool character, such a cool shot with that massive sword. He looks.
Yeah.
You really want to see him play more, and it's weird as well because we're not getting into the cards, but obviously this is the second place that we see Reckless Strikes appear in the Tactics deck.
Yeah.
So it would have been nice to have seen. I mean, they've given us two new cards, completely new, individual to Gerald Dane cards. It would have been nice seeing a third one really, rather than recycle another commander card as the same card.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that Obara really should trade hers for Assault Ogres or Fury of the Fallen, because this is, I believe, the only instance in the game of a faction having two commanders with the same with a shared card.
Yeah, I think you are right. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Okay, cool. And next up we have Daemon Sand, Vengeful Knight. I've seen him play quite a lot in the local meta, especially with the increasing number of Skyreach Bowmen appearing as well. So he comes with Intimidation of the Crowns. If you control Crowns, when this unit is performing a melee attack before rolling an attack dice, the defender becomes panicked and weakened. And he comes with Rally Cry. So each time this unit is performing a melee attack, before rolling attack dice, target one other friendly unit in long range. It restores 2 wounds. He seems to be a really solid commander for Martell's. Is he as good as I'm seeing, or?
Yeah, he's quite solid. When he first came out, actually, I ran him quite a bit. I do like it. Having extra rally cry is nice. Intimidation of the Crown a lot of the time is like if I have it, it's nice, but I don't necessarily try to get it. Like if it happens, it happens. The rally cry is nice. Usually that means you have two places on the field where you have him and an outrider unit. Now you're getting all that extra healing. The reason you're seeing him a bit more now is one of his cards, Need for Vengeance. Not to get into cards too much, but he essentially he can have a unit attack off the top of the round, which is really nice when you have a ranged unit now that gets buffed if they're attacking and your opponent hasn't activated, which if you're shooting at the top of the round, your opponent cannot have activated. So there are some interesting Daemon lists I'm playing around with. There's some more traditional 7 activation lists with him because he can also really buff, do some crazy things with Skirmishers. But I'm also looking at some 5/3 lists with Daemon that have double Bowmen. And then Daemon in a unit of Spearmen is something I'm trying to play around with, where if your opponent charges your Spearman, then you can set off that rally cry and heal somewhere else. It'll take some testing to see if it's really worth it, or if a more traditional 7 activation is still better. But he's interesting. He brings some healing, and then his cards actually can bring in some extra damage output, which isn't something you get a lot of in Martell's. But his damage output from the cards is in some cheeky ways. He has the only way in Martell's, one of the few ways in the game, to get a double tap, and by that I mean essentially have 2 units make an attack on one unit in one turn, which is always very powerful because it means your opponent doesn't have a chance to heal in between. So keep an eye out for that when we get to the tactics cards.
Yeah. If it's very much the same as the last activation, first activation, round start and finish in it, or finish and start. So it allows you to double tap
it's like
stuff.
it's like that, but more powerful, because with first, your opponent there's still a start of turn trigger in there for your opponent to maybe play a card to do something. Being able to do it all within the same turn, it really limits the abilities to respond.
Nice.
You don't even have a turn to pop a Tycho in between. So
oof, yeah, that's filthy. Nice. Okay, cool. And that ends all the commanders now. So we're going to get into the NCUs. So on screen now we have Nymeria Sand for 4 points with conflicting reactions. So it's Influence NCU. When this unit claims a zone, attach this card to a combat unit until the end of the round. So every time I mention that it's an influence MCU, this will be what that means. So while influencing a friendly infantry unit, if you or your opponent controls crowns, its melee attacks gain vicious. If you or your opponent controls swords, its melee attacks gain critical blow. And if you or your opponent controls horses, it gains +1 movement. Obviously, we discussed this in the most recent, the previous update, that this got changed from water garlands to horses, which makes it much more usable.
Yeah.
Ilaria Sand, 4 points again. Viper's Paramour, Lysini Charm. Each time Ilaria claims a zone, target one friendly combat unit, you may remove one condition token from them. If you control swords, target one enemy unit in long range of the target friendly unit, they gain one condition token. Both really nice NCUs. What we think on these guys?
Yeah, so Nymeria, I don't get on the table as much just because there's other NCUs I prefer, but she's definitely very interesting. That it's you or your opponent control.
Yeah,
You don't bring Dorne NCU with her because you don't want Water Gardens to mess with that. But they're solid buffs. Vicious is kind of nice. Criplo is good on a bunch of our units if they don't already have Criplo. We do have a few units that have it, which is a bit unfortunate, but for those that don't, it is quite nice. And extra movement. Every extra movement is always nice. There is a possibility because we have a lot of 6 speed infantry, including skirmishers, some of which might have sentinels in them to give them +1. You potentially have a sand skirmisher that moves 8 inches, and fairly reasonably. And because if anyone controls the horse, you could even start with her taking the horse, influencing something like sand skirmishers, and then moving them 8 inches, and then shifting and shooting,
yeah,
making them have a 16-inch threat range, which is quite far. So yeah, she's definitely an interesting NCU. I don't get her personally on the table a lot. I know a lot of people do like her. I definitely think she's a perfectly valid choice. Sometimes it just comes down to you run out of space when you have other NCUs you prefer.
yeah, yeah,
Ilaria, on the other hand, I'd say makes most Martell lists. The ability to remove condition tokens is very big, and then a completely separate ability, which means you don't need to remove a condition token to use the second ability. When you have swords, being able to throw out a condition token is huge. You'll often see a start of first activation of the round taking swords, her maybe clearing a weakened from a unit you want to attack with, and then also throwing out either a weakened, so the counter attack from your opponent's weaker, or a vulnerable or panic to try and push through extra damage. So even though she isn't what she was when she was released, where she dropped 2 tokens, the
yeah,
one token is still quite strong, and that token removal, especially in certain lists, is very crucial, right? So
mm,
that Arya Hota Doran commander list where you need that unit to be able to charge and do a lot of damage, being able to remove a weakened token from them is very important.
yeah. And obviously she's a starter box NCU as well, so you get her right out of the bat as well when you're starting your
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
Nice, nice. Um, yeah, that's really cool. Really nice. Really like that. Next up we have Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper, for 4 points. Comes with Hot Tempered. Again, it's influence ability. So the second influence ability we've now seen for Martells. So while influencing a friendly unit, each time an enemy attacks this unit with a melee attack, after resolving that attack, the attacker suffers 1 hit +1 hit for each of the defender's remaining ranks. And we have Tying Sand for 5 points. Is one of two 5 point NCUs for Martell, if I'm right.
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's correct.
So which comes with Healing Hand. So each time Tying claims a zone, you may target one friendly combat unit. They restore a wound, which is nice. And at the start of round 2, choose one tactic zone. The next time an enemy NCU claims that zone, attach the Strangler Poison card to that NCU. And the Strangler was changed recently, and we have gone over it, but I'll go over it again for completion's sake. So this unit suffers the following based on the game round. Effects are cumulative. So after turn 2, you lose all abilities. On turn 3, you do not count as controlling tactic zones for abilities or effects. 4 turns, you may only activate this unit if you have no other units that can activate this round. After round 5, you destroy this unit at the start of the round. So basically, at round 5, your NCU then dies. It's the only way of killing an NCU in a game at the moment. Um, Obviously, when Time was first released, people were just really talking about this poison thing, and it was really, really powerful. But I think people have found certain ways to play around it now. But I think this version of Strangler, and again, we have discussed it in previous videos, is a lot better than the older version. But yeah, give us your opinion on these two guys. Well, this guy and this girl.
Yeah. So Oberyn, he's a decent NCU. He used to be amazing. He got hit by a double nerf. We're still hoping at some point they'll roll back one of the nerfs. He's okay. Realistically, because Martells will usually lose at least a rank when they're attacked, what you're looking at is when your opponent attacks you after they're done attacking. They're going to probably take 3 hits back if it's early in the game, 2 hits back maybe if it's later in the game, which is it's not bad. Auto hits can be good, especially against weaker armored troops. But he's not the strongest. There are better NCUs you'll usually reach for, which is too bad because I like having Oberyn on the table as much as possible, even when I'm not running his commander. It's a cool model. So
Yeah.
yeah, he used to be extremely powerful. He's now okay. He used to do 2 hits plus ranks, and then he used to do it before the enemy attacked, which is all extremely powerful. Realistically, I think he could do with one of those being reversed, either give him more hits or make it back to being before the enemy attacks. But
Yeah.
otherwise, he's fine. If you really want to run him, if you like having a Oberyn in all your lists, bring him. Let him defend Tyrion.
Yeah.
That's the NCU version. That's for the book readers. This is him when he comes and is causing trouble on the council. So
Yeah.
Tyene is interesting. The Strangler is definitely better than it used to be. The healing's kind of nice. Strong players will know how to play around it. A lot of the time, what that means is just accepting that one of your NCUs is going to lose their abilities. At most, I find this usually means that turn 2, maybe the opponent doesn't take whichever zone I've poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
But by turn 3, most people have an NCU that they can kind of afford to lose their abilities on and then afford to lose. It's not the best. Like, people would prefer not to, but that's usually what it means. There's a lot of NCUs that can kind of use all their abilities or tokens early enough that they aren't really losing too much in that regard. So I think she's fine. She's fun. I think there's still some interesting play, especially with like Damon Sand, so that if you turn 2 are using the attack off the top of the round, you can um, make it so your opponent taking, for example, the swords is less appealing, um, which can negate some of the downside of Damon's card. So
Mm-hmm.
she's definitely fun and interesting to play around. In a more casual setting, she can definitely cause a lot of headaches. Some people get really afraid of the idea of one of their NCUs dying. It's kind of like in the Dark Knight with the Joker. If you're going to tell someone that their combat unit's going to get killed, nobody bats an eye. But once you tell them their NCU is going to die, suddenly now it's that kind of messes with them because, as you said, we don't think of NCUs as something that can be killed. So
Yeah. 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 I think she thinks she's a decent NCU. So are you? Do you find you're taking her then in your list, or is it a nice to have in some points?
I think she's a sometimes.
Yeah.
Like there are lists where she'll show up, but she's not someone I reach for very heavily, especially this season. We'll get to it in a bit, but the other 5 point NCU I think is has much more consistent value
Yeah.
over Tyene.
Okay. Cool. Let's get into that one now then. So up on screen we have Aris Oakhart for 4 points. Unfaltering politics. So once per game during the cleanup phase, you may keep Aris Oakhart on the tactics board. It does not activate next round. If Aris Oakhart begins the round on the tactics board, the target one enemy combat unit they become weakened. So what it obviously means is that at the end of the round, when you take him into off the board, you leave him on there, so he effectively blocks a zone for another round. Um, and all you get out of that then is that a unit becomes weakened. Um, and Oberyn Martell for 5 points, so a second 5 point NCU, a third influence NCU, negotiator. So she influence NCU as previously mentioned. Each time Oberyn Martell influences a unit, choose one. So while influencing an enemy unit, attachments on that unit lose all abilities, or while influencing the enemy unit, they cannot be the target of friendly orders. This NCU is the utter bane of Bastard Girls for me. It turns me into a four dice archer unit for yeah. Yeah, go on, let
She's
me
the
get
bane
into
of
it.
a lot. Yeah, well, I'll start with Eris first. Eris is another. He's a good NCU. He's not someone you breach for all the time. the ability to just like prevent your opponent from taking the swords. The big play here is with rising temperatures, being able to essentially say no to your opponent. I'm gonna attach it. You have first activation on round two. After swords is already taken, you're gonna activate a unit. I'll put rising temperatures on you. Next round, I'll start by taking swords, so you can't take it off. The next round, Eris will stay on the board, so you can't take it off round four. And I go round five first. Like you do that,
Mm.
and then your opponent's stuck with rising temperatures on a unit or two units for the most of the game.
Yeah.
That was his big. That was his big play. That's like where his main value comes from. In the past, that was a cool play, but it wasn't very consistent necessarily because you know part of that is you had to draw rising temperatures. Now, with Ario Hota attachment becoming a lot easier to get into lists, now this combo actually I think has more legs because it's more consistent. I can sacrifice cards to guarantee that I can pull this off,
Mm.
outside of things that can remove Eris's abilities, which some people do, or uh, some Baratheon things that allow you to move where the enemy NCU is. So
Mm.
outside of those, which they exist in the game, but it's the exception, not the norm.
Mm.
With him partnered with Dorne Hota attachment, now can actually pull that combo off a lot more. And anyone that's played against Martells knows how frustrating rising temperatures is on their units, and being having it stuck on a unit or two even for the vast majority of the game can be crippling. So um, I think he might have more play this season because of that combination. So it's a bit yet to be seen. I haven't had enough chance to really check and play it out enough to see if it really is that strong. But it's definitely something we knew about before that now has become a lot more consistent. So he's really cool for that.
Yeah.
Ariane was already a frustrating NCU. The number of opponents I've had complain about her after games to me because, oh, I had this unit that had this whole plan, I had this attachment in them. Oh yeah, I had, oh yeah, Theon was in this attachment so that they'd be able to just auto charge whenever I needed them to and then jump away and things like that. Oh wait, no, they can't. Or oh yeah, this unit is really tanky. They aren't that tanky, but resilience makes it so they don't really die. Oh wait, no, they don't have resilience. Uh,
Yeah.
the Martell mirror. Ariane is the most frustrating thing into the Martell mirror because Martells love their attachments, and Martells more so even like they love their orders. Sand skirmishers without their orders are a not good unit. They kind of just get really sad. And Ariane just can be like, oh, I see that your unit has two orders or sometimes three orders because you have an attachment that brings an order.
Mm.
Yeah, no, now you don't. I know my final game at Invitational was into a Martell mirror where I did not have Ariane and my opponent had both Ariane and Jaqen, so essentially
Oh.
double Ariane, and it was it was kind of rough. I was playing without my attachments or without orders for a lot of the game, and yeah, she's going to be very powerful, especially this season where now everyone gets free attachments.
Yeah.
One of the things always used to be with Ariane, people would say, well, sometimes your opponent might not have orders, and maybe they only have their commander attachment. So, are you really getting 5 points of value there?
Mm.
This season, you're pretty much guaranteed that most units have attachments in them, and realistically there's probably going to be at least one in every turn. There's probably going to be at least one that is worth turning off, not to mention if there's a unit that has good orders, something like, as you said, bastards girls that kind of really relies on their charging volley to get the damage output that they want. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's very good. I think she'll be more of a pick this season because of that. Also, there used to be a lot of list builds in the past where it was a question of, I want Ariane, but I can't bring her and put an attachment necessarily in my skirmish. Like the points worked out that way. I need that point to put an attachment in the skirmishers or X place. Well, now that attachment's free, so now we
Mm.
can upgrade NCU to Ariane. So it works out.
So yes, obviously there's three influence NCUs there from Martells. Which one do you just tend to find you're picking up, if any?
Yeah, so I'd say Ariane is definitely the most likely one for me to pick up. Um, Oberyn's an enemy influence, so it's a bit different.
Mm.
But between That's the same as Arian. So Nymeria is a friendly influence, so it's a bit different than the other two that are influencing enemy units.
Yeah.
But Arian's definitely, I'd say, the one I'd lean towards the most. If I have the points to spend on her. And I think this season there's going to be a lot of attachments you want to turn off and a lot of orders you want to turn off. So yeah, I think we'll
Awesome.
see it.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. So we've got one last NCU to check out. Big Daddy Doran, Prince of Martell, Prince of Dawn, sorry, King of Martells, for 4 points. So we see a recent tweak in the last update, and I think he's in a really, really good place as an NCU. Obviously, he brings water guards with him, so we'll go over it. Sunspear Secret. So each time Doran Martell claims a zone, before resolving that zone's effect, place one order token on him. If Doran claims the Water Gardens, place +1 order token on him. Each time Doran claims the Water Garden, you may replace that zone's effect with remove up to 4 tokens from a friendly Doran. For each order token removed, choose one. So you can restore up to 2 wounds from one unit, remove 1 condition token from one unit, draw 1 tactics card, place any 1 condition token on an enemy unit. 1 friendly unit pivots, then shifts 2 inches. And 1 enemy combat unit suffers 1 wound. So there is loads going on that card. And obviously he brings with him the Water Gardens, so there can only be 1 Water Gardens in the game. While you control the zone, opponents do not count as controlling tactic zones or abilities for tactics cards. And obviously the additional bit underneath of on your opponent's next turn, they must activate a combat unit if possible. And this only comes with the 4-point NCU version, not the Commander version. So he very much seems like a mega multi-tool. We've obviously discussed him a little bit and hinted at him a little bit during this conversation, and you've sort of suggested that maybe the Water Gardens is a bit of an anti-synergistic piece for the Martells. But do you want to get into Doran Martell, Prince of Dawn?
Yeah, so his NCU itself is actually a lot of fun. You do need to take the Water Garden to use his ability. It's also worth noting you are only allowed to use each ability once when you pop it. You can't just pop it and say I spend 4 tokens to heal 8 wounds, which some people early on thought you could. You can't, so don't try and do that. We jokingly refer to him as build your own tactics zone. Because his abilities are all kind of like little pieces of the other tactic zones, and what you often can just kind of do what you need in the moment, right? If it's your opponent goes first, they take the bag or the envelope. Well, now Doran can take the Water Garden, gains 2 tokens, immediately spend them, and be like, okay, cool. Well, now I'll draw a card because I want a card, and I'll remove a condition. Or, you don't have another way to put out conditions. I have Ilaria; she'll do that later. I'll put a condition on you and do my own mini envelope. Later in game, the ability to pivot and shift is really big. Someone's trying to sneak past a unit. Well, now I'm actually still facing you. You can also do some funny things with Oberyn Commander. When someone has Manticore Venom on them, being able to say, okay, I deal a wound to you. Oh, also, you're getting a condition, another vulnerable on you, so I do another wound, just being able to plink these extra wounds. It does some cute things there.
Yeah.
He's very solid. The Water Garden is really handy to have. But we're seeing more and more of these abilities, like what the Kingsmen have, or the new Motivated by Coin, where it's if your opponent doesn't control X zone, you get these buffs. What Water Gardens does is essentially makes it so those can always be active for your opponent. So, looking at the example of Brother with the Banners, or Barrack and Kingsman type of thing, where they get Criplo and rerolls if your opponent doesn't control crowns. Well, let's say I have Dorne in my list, so I have Water Gardens. I don't want my opponent to get those rerolls in Criplo. So let's say I take the crown. If I take the crown, my opponent takes the Water Garden. I no longer out of the crown. His abilities are turned back on. If I take the Water Garden, if my opponent takes the crown, then I will never have the crown, and my opponent's abilities are turned back on. So there's essentially, if my opponent gets the crown first, he gets his abilities because I can't have it. If I get to the crown first, he takes Water Gardens. I can't have it. So it's really easy for them to keep those abilities on, and because we're seeing more of those, again, motivated by coin, it's similar thing, but with the bags, because we're seeing more of those, there is situations where if you're facing that a lot, you might want to be mindful of that and maybe don't bring Dorne. So, for example, at Invitational, I was worried and expected that there was going to be a lot of Brotherhood without banners because they're very powerful and it was a competitive event. And I faced them twice, and because I had changed my Oberyn list to not have Dorne in it, it ended up being a big deal for me. It made it so I was able to, because I also had Peter, I was able to make it the opposite. So my opponent pretty much never had those abilities turned on for their Kingsmen or their Brotherhood Knights because I didn't. But if I had had Water Gardens, they would have been on the entire time. The damage of those units would have been ramped up that much more. So it is something I think now you need to be more mindful of. In the past, it used to be more of sometimes the Water Gardens can backfire because I want to be controlling zones. And if I take swords and then my opponent takes Water Gardens, I don't control it anymore, which is something to be mindful of. But the other one, the your opponent not controlling one, I think is the bigger I guess fear. You can play around it. Like you could choose to take the Water Gardens and not do Doran's Zone Replace, and just use the Water Gardens ability to say your opponent has to activate a unit, and then you could use your second NCU take to take the crowns. But now you're investing a lot into preventing it, whereas putting in Peter in your list can do the same for easier. So
Yeah.
um, it's just something to be mindful of. Dorne is very strong. I think he's definitely probably in at least one of your lists. But it is something to be aware of when playing into some of those matchups. And we're still waiting to see how prevalent motivated by coin becomes. Because neutral attachments aren't free, we don't need to worry as much about people just shoving brawn everywhere. Because I think otherwise, brawn used to always be in range units, but I think if neutral attachments were free, we'd still see brawn, but he'd be in you know
Yeah.
melee units now. But uh, I think it's just something to be aware of. Dorne is very fun though, and the versatility of his card, the ability, usually you don't get the Water Gardens every turn, but usually every other turn you can spend your tokens. What that usually means is you're dropping 3 or 4 tokens when you do it, and you can really just shape it to whatever you need. And it's also a lot for opponents to think around. I've both been on both receiving and using it, and the number of times the person that's not playing Doran's like, oh yeah, I had not accounted for the fact that you could turn and shift towards me. I thought I was staying just outside of your charge range. Actually, now, or just outside where you could see me and charge me. Now, actually, never mind. You're now auto charging me if you want, and I can't do anything about it. Things like that. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. Definitely try them, but yeah, just be mindful of the Water Gardens and how that can be used against you.
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of abilities in his card. The first few times after making these changes, I had to keep a version of the card open next to me while playing, just because I keep forgetting what he could do.
Yeah,
That the pivot and the 2-inch shift thing is can be quite big because you're setting yourself up to for flank, and you're ready to go, and it just really yeah, it can really catch you out. If you forget he's got that can really catch you out. I'd quite like to see this for Greyjoy. I've been playing Greyjoys a bit recently. I'd love to see that because that
well,
solves the
you have
cavalry problem.
Windermere. You have Windermere. That's similar.
Yeah, yeah. But have been at a pivot as well. I'll take that.
Yeah, the pivot is big. I've seen it come up a lot with like Skyreach Bowmen, where if someone's snuck past them,
Mm,
being able to just like suddenly turn them, even without the shift. Just the pivoting around is big for being like, no, I am now able to see you and shoot you
yeah,
when I activate. So yeah,
awesome,
it's fun.
awesome. But I think it brings him in line at his point cost. I think it brings him in line with some of the other head of houses. Obviously, he's nowhere near as powerful as the 6-point NCUs, but he's only 4 points. But I think it makes him quite nice and quite a key piece for Martell's. Um,
Yeah,
cool. Okay. Sweet. Well, that is the end of it, mate. It's been really nice having a talk to you about House Martell. And the best thing about these conversations with you is they get longer and longer and longer each time. Because when we first had conversations about them, there was nothing to talk about. But now we've got lots to talk about, which is awesome.
yeah. Well, it's always great being on and talking about Martells. They're definitely my favorite faction in the game. They're fun. It's always great coming on. I look forward to coming on to talk about the tactics deck because the Martell tactics deck is very good. I'd say it's probably one of the best, if not the best in the game. Um, So it'll be a lot of fun talking about that and pointing out how few bad cards, if any, there are in the deck.
For sure, for sure. Okay, cool. Before I let you go, a couple of questions for you. So one is around the season 6 changes. So has the restriction of neutral commanders impacted the way House Martell play?
Not a lot. There have been times in Martell's history where people have tried like running Roost Martell. I played Roost with Martells for a while, but I didn't like the Incas Panic. Um, I had actually just before the season change fallen in love with Vargo in Martells. I really was liking Vargo Martells, so I'm a bit sad about that. But I don't think it's a big deal. I think Martells over the years had different neutral commanders they really liked. Jockin was almost felt like he was designed as a Martell commander, so losing him was a bit sad. But I think they're fine. We'll get around it. The biggest difference is Martells, as one of the newer factions, don't have the quantity of commander options of other factions. So it is a bit sad that, now we're back to our 6 commanders, right? 6? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 commanders. So, there's a bit of a variety hit, but I think we're fine without them.
Awesome, awesome. And finally, just so for new people that are just getting into the game, they've listened to us talk for the last 2 hours and 15 minutes. Why should they choose House Martell over all of the other factions?
I think it really comes down to what the person's playstyle is. If you are the type of person that likes just like shoving a bunch of violence down your opponent's throat, don't play Martells. I'm not going to tell you to play Martells. If you like if you like playing a game that you're moving around and dancing around your opponent and outmaneuvering, out positioning, and then scalping out units, if that's the type of play style you like, then play Martells. I don't think there's another faction that does it quite as well as Martells. And then also if you just if you're more of like that control player where you're less interested about buffing your units and more interested in weakening your opponent and taking away what your opponent wants to do, then play that. Just remember to always be super nice and friendly as a person, because Martells have a tendency to really frustrate and annoy their opponents just because of that control aspect. So just if you're going to pick them up as a new player, just remember, be nice and friendly, be patient with your opponent, because if you're playing Martells right, they will end up being very frustrating to deal with.
Always bring a bag of jelly babies to offer at the end, just in case.
Exactly. And at Invitational, the me and Gamma, the other Canadian, brought gifts for our opponents. Help deal with any hard feelings. Start off on a good foot.
Awesome. Okay, dude. Well, thank you once again for joining me. I know it's early for you guys over there, and you spent a long time talking to me about Martell, but I really do appreciate your time and your valuable input, because as someone that's played Martells at a high level for a long time, getting new people into the game, I think you're going to be the person that they should really reference and sort of get ideas from when it comes to list building and how to play the faction. So I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me, and yeah, it's always great talking about it. There's plenty of videos I think I have online of me playing Martell games if people want to watch, or you can always talk to me on the Discord, the main Song of Ice and Fire Discord. I'm usually hanging out in the Sunspear chat area. So yeah,
Awesome.
Thanks for having me, and hopefully this was useful to people getting into the game or getting into Martells.
Awesome, fantastic. And if you have enjoyed the video, please do like it, share it between your friends and your gaming groups to help them if they need it. And if you really enjoy what we're doing enough to want to help us a little bit more, please do subscribe to the channel and press the notification button so that you get a little notification come through every time we release a new video. But for now, Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken. Cheers, Jordan.
Cheers.